What's going on, dudes? Counting Gains back here again. So today we got the American Civil War explained. So obviously, guys, I live here in Ireland. I've lived here my whole entire life, and basically, guys, I took history up till about the age of 16, but I never once learned about American history. Okay, so we learned about Irish history. Michael Collins, shout out Michael Collins, absolute beast, man. The squad, you know what I mean? You know, shooting and pushing back all the British people. You know, the British came over here thinking they were tough, trying to do something. We beat their ass. But anyway, that's another story, guys. But the American Civil War is completely different, guys. My brothers talked about it before. I've never really heard about it. I've heard about it before. It's basically when they got there, it was the North fighting the South, something like that. Never listened to it ever before. So this is going to be a great video for me as well as you guys. And yeah, guys, like I said, I only took history up to the age of about 16. So I don't know anything about American Civil War. You know, I've only been to America once, and that was very recently, and Canada as well. Shout out Canada. And yeah, this one should be super interesting, guys. Don't know what to expect, so let's get straight into it. So like, comment, subscribe, go check out my Patreon, go check out my merch, all that good stuff, guys, and let's get it.
Between 1803 and 1854, the United States achieved a vast expansion of territory through purchase, negotiation, and conquest. But with this rapid growth in size of the American territory, the controversial question arose as to whether new territories should become free or slave states. More than a territorial crisis, the question of slavery had already been dividing American public opinion for years, and the rise to power of a supporter of abolition would be the trigger for war. In the first half of the 19th century, the United States expanded westward with the annexation of territories from a vast number of countries such as France, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Mexico, among others.
So yeah, I knew that. So they came over in the Mayflower, a bunch of people from Ireland. Many American people are all Irish, guys. I don't care what anyone says. Oh, they're not Irish. They're 100% Irish, guys. And French, Spanish, English, stuff like that.
In half a century, the territory of the United States tripled in size, and the government had yet to manage the administration of these new lands. But a problem that arose as a result of this expansion was the distribution of these lands, with the northern states demanding new states to become free ones, and southern states demanding them to become slave ones. You can already see where this is going.
Uh-oh.
The question of slavery in the United States was becoming explosive. And
slavery was still in America up till 1861. That's actually crazy.
The economy of the North was booming and industrializing at a rapid rate, with more than 23 million people living there.
Yeah.
The economy of the South was struggling to get by, relying heavily on slavery and farming, with a way smaller population of around 9 million people.
So the North basically had all the people, all the money, everything. The South was kind of slowly progressing. They still had slavery. I get that.
Of which 3.5 million were slaves, and thus, well, as you would expect, were very unlikely to fight.
It's a lot of slaves.
Both sides used the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution as evidences to their claims. The South pointed to the right to property and saw the Union as something they could leave whenever they wanted, while the North thought of it as one country ruled by a central government and pointed to the all men are created equal bit.
Yeah.
These backbones of America's society were left a little bit too much to interpretation by the founding fathers, and many people were wondering what they really meant. Could black people be citizens? Should slavery be abolished? Cereal or milk first? More seriously, some tried to solve the issue
I mean, the lady explaining this kind of used that facetiousness in a quite serious case. Black people be citizens, could slavery be abolished, cereal or milk first? Yeah, because that's on the same level as should slaves be abolished. Man, come on.
Seriously, some tried to solve the issue pacifically, but it often resulted in very controversial and outrageous compromises, like the one of 1850, which gave statehood to California, proposed these lands under the Missouri Compromise line to decide their status by themselves, and implemented the fugitive slave law, forcing any state, even those who had abolished slavery, to hand back slaves that had escaped.
This is complicated.
But tensions were still rising, as Northerners didn't really want to actively participate in maintaining slavery a thing, because...
Guys, we've had our own civil war here in Ireland, okay? So we had like a big north-south division. I live in the Republic, guys. I live in the actual Ireland, the South, right? I don't live in the 6 counties. I live in Galway, right? So it's like part of the 26 counties to the south, right? So we live in the Republic. We had a big civil war. We fought off the British. We won, but we still kind of only got, 26 counties. They got 6, so kind of a bit of a compromise as they're doing here. They're trying to compromise.
As well, they kind of started realizing that it was immoral a little bit, and also due to the rise of a brand new party in the North, the Republican Party, founded in 1854, that was very, very much against slavery. The atmosphere was
So the Republican Party was against slavery. Aren't we always told that the Democrats were against slavery?
so tense that politicians in Congress started carrying guns with them, and sometimes fights between representatives would even occur.
Jesus.
That gives you a glimpse of the political atmosphere that reigned in America before the beginning of the Civil War.
Crazy.
The election of Abraham Lincoln in November 1860 as the first Republican president in history was the final trigger for succession. Even though Lincoln was pretty moderate and initially didn't plan to abolish slavery right away, 7 slave states had declared their succession and joined to form the Confederacy under the presidency of Jefferson Davis before he even took office in March 1861, leaving Lincoln without many options. The war started in April 1861, when South Carolina attacked Fort Sumter after the government refused their demand to evacuate federal troops
So
from
South Carolina was part of the North. So North and South Carolina were part of the North, and I think that the next state over there was part of the South.
the state. When the fort capitulated, the government kind of said screw it and asked every state to send forces to recapture the fort. 4 states refused to send forces against their neighbors and joined the Confederacy. 4 other states, Maryland, Delaware, Missouri, and Kentucky, were slave states that were opposed to both secession and coercing the South. West Virginia then joined them as an additional border state after it separated from Virginia. Soon, the South also started raising troops among the population. Surprisingly enough, the beginning of the war was kind of a struggle for the Union due to its relatively old and incompetent generals, while the South had brilliant ones such as Robert E. Lee.
Oh yeah, so Robert E. Lee was an amazing general, guys. But he lost the war, so it shows you how much of a good general he really was. People always say Robert E. Lee is an amazing general. I believe Trump said that, but he's not that good of a general if he lost the war, guys. So I don't know. There's both sides to it, right?
Immediately after the beginning of the war, the North implemented a naval blockade against the South to cut their supplies. The first major battle of the war, the First Battle of Bull Run, occurred on July 21st, 1861,
Bull Run,
when the North attempted to take the southern capital, Richmond.
Yeah.
And the battle was chaotic, to say the least.
I bet.
Many soldiers had absolutely no experience in combat. The flags on each side were so similar that nobody knew who they were shooting at, and civilians from all around the country even came to Virginia to have a picnic while watching the battle. With heavy casualties on both
They're having picnics while watching the battle. That's insane, bro. I never learned any of this, guys. This is crazy.
sides, the Confederacy eventually pushed back Northern forces.
Jesus.
And things kept getting worse for the North for a while. Nevertheless, a Northern general named Ulysses S. Grant
Ulysses S. Grant, guys. This guy is a legend, man. This guy should be the leader of what happened in Iraq and stuff. If we had him around today, guys, you know what I mean? The war in Iraq and Afghanistan would be a lot better.
started making a name for himself with key military victories in the West. By February of 1862, the Union Army had achieved victories in central Kentucky and Tennessee. The Army planned to move south and capture an important Confederate east-west railway hub in northern Mississippi. With heavy casualties of over 23,000 people on both sides, the Union won this battle. However, on the other side of the Atlantic, tensions started to rise with the United Kingdom because of what's known today as the Trent Affair. On November 8, 1861, Confederate diplomats were found by the United States on a British ship, almost escalating into a war between the two countries. Even after the release of the diplomats, European powers were still threatening to intervene as they couldn't import cotton from the South due to the blockade anymore. Empowered by Southern victory,
See, they only wanted their money, guys. They didn't care about the slaves or anything. That's Britain for you right there, guys. Didn't give us our potatoes, didn't give us our food, send it all over to England. Well, thanks for that, Britain. Frickin' Freaking assholes, man.
For the first time, Robert E. Lee gathered its forces and pushed into Northern Territory, hoping to threaten Washington, D.C. The attack was well prepared and very likely to succeed. Except that, nope. The plans for the battle were found around a cigar by a soldier.
Oh.
Union soldiers found a copy of Confederate General Robert E. Lee's orders detailing the Confederates' plan for the Antietam Campaign in Maryland. The Battle of Antietam occurred on September 17, 1862, and stays to this day the bloodiest day in the United States military history, with a combined tally of 23,000 killed.
Whoa.
The day ended in a draw, but halted Lee's plans to invade the North for the time being. On January 1st, 1863,
Crazy.
Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation,
Oh,
which
yeah, the Emancipation Proclamation. I've heard that in a lot of rap songs before.
abolished slavery in the Confederate States, thus changing the main purpose of this war.
So they abolished the slavery now in the States in 1863.
From trying to avoid succession to fighting for the abolition of slavery, Lincoln had given a new meaning to the Civil War. More than a moral decision by Lincoln, it made the war more legitimate and made the intervention of France and the United Kingdom into the conflict against the Union almost impossible, since they had already abolished slavery themselves, and it would have made them look quite hypocritical. The war was at a turning point. In July 1863, Robert E. Lee attempted a new capture of Washington, D.C., in what would become the most famous battle of the war, the Battle of Gettysburg.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody kinda knew that the winner of this battle would most likely win the war. Union casualties numbered around 23,000 people, while Confederate casualties numbered around 28,000. This battle resulted in a massive and decisive Northern victory.
Yeah,
News from the West were even better, as the Mississippi River just fell under Ulysses S. Grant's control after the siege of Vicksburg. The victories, a day apart, at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, marked the turning point of the Civil War. They also ensured that European powers did not recognize the Confederacy as a sovereign nation, withholding much-needed support. The ravages of war were still evident in Gettysburg more than 4 months later, when on November 19, 1863, the Soldiers' National Cemetery was dedicated. During this ceremony that became another key event of American history, President Abraham Lincoln honored the fallen and redefined the purpose of the war in his historic Gettysburg Address. On that day, where he wasn't even the day's primary speech, that's true, another guy reportedly spoke 2 hours nonstop before Lincoln started speaking. It is Lincoln that went down in history, and kinda stole the spotlight, to be honest, describing in 271 words the U.S. as a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
That's awesome.
In 1864, Ulysses S. Grant, whom Lincoln appreciated very much at that point, mostly because, well, he was definitely the best general of the Northern forces, even though a little bit too keen on whiskey, was appointed General-in-Chief of the Union Army.
He must have been Irish, man. He was a bit keen on the old whiskey. He was fond of the whiskey. Well, sounds like he was Irish.
Though a little bit too keen on whiskey, was appointed General-in-Chief of the Union Army and ordered an attack on all fronts. Atlanta was sieged and then taken by General William Sherman, and in the East, the two greatest generals of the war, Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, faced in a series of battles that killed or wounded more than 80,000 people in only a matter of weeks, before settling near Richmond.
Nuts.
More than that, in the 1864 election, Abraham Lincoln was re-elected with an astonishing 91% in favor of the sitting president. With Southern generals refusing to surrender, Sherman moved from Atlanta and took over Georgia and South Carolina. All of this while causing a massive mess with billions of dollars of damages, burning railroads, farms, and freeing slaves. In the East, with more and more pressure from the Union, General Lee fled from Grant's siege, and Southern forces burned to the ground the city of Richmond, the capital of the South. Lee surrendered a few weeks later, and other generals followed suit. The American Civil War was over. In Congress, the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery and involuntary servitude was passed by the Senate on April 8, 1864, and by the House of Representatives on January 31st, 1865.
Wow.
Unfortunately, Lincoln wouldn't be able to see the ratification of his amendment and greatest achievement, as he would be shot by John Wilkes Booth on April 14, 1865 at
I know about that.
Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, in Washington, D.C., he was murdered, shot in the back of the head.
and would pass away the next day. The amendment was ratified by the required number of states on December 6, 1865. The Confederate President Jefferson Davis was soon captured, and the South came under military occupation. However, the hardest task was yet to come: Reconstruction and Reconciliation. Over 750,000 men died in this conflict, which means it stays to this day the deadliest in American history.
Whoa.
Black people would soon be given citizenship and the right to vote. Families were reunited, and decades of suffering for millions of black people finally came to an end. Yet, the fighting has continued up to this day to end discrimination and in favor of equality. Even today, the consequences of this war still have repercussions on the United States of America and the American society as a whole. Yet, just like Abraham Lincoln did in his time, we should strive for unity and progress.
Bro, I love
Little did Lincoln know that he would be remembered as a humble president who preserved the nation and fought for what was right.
I love
He
it.
stays to this day one of the most consequential and beloved presidents in American history.
Shout out Abraham Lincoln. We love you, baby. Legend. Oh, that's class, guys.
Thanks for watching.
That lady, go subscribe to Pike. That lady gave an amazing breakdown of that, guys. So that was, I've never seen that in my whole life. Little humble Irish man getting humbled there by American Civil War history. That was class, guys. I've never seen that before, U.S. history. So, like, I understood a few things, Gettysburg. Like, you know, we kind of learned a few of these things because my dad, he lived abroad and stuff like that. So he kind of told me some of that stuff growing up, but I never really got the full breakdown. It was really cool to see, guys. Any more kind of American history videos that you guys want me to react to, leave in the comments down below. Absolutely class. Great to see that they got their civil freedom, their obviously their civil liberties in the end, like we did here in Ireland. Very similar, guys. But yeah, absolutely fire. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one, man. Peace.